And the real threat is that the generative AI technology gets to a point where today they are creating these call centers, the fraudulent call centers, by hiring bodies, by hiring humans. Instead of that, they can just use bots to create a widespread attack with just one or two fraudsters. And that's the scenario that absolutely is imminent. And at Pindrop, we are always trying to stay ahead of the next level fraud patterns. We have been very, very successful in identifying the fraud that happens today in the contact centers. And that's what really was the reason why we started looking into it. It just sometimes we smile about it, that the fact that we were talking about it for so many years and now the entire world is talking about it. But the reality is, you're absolutely right. It's moving from not just the risk to consumers at corporations, but also risk to consumers directly.
Synthedia.
I'm joined on the stage by Amit Gupta, my friend from Pindrop Security, and I think you're going to show us something that almost no one has seen before, and it's probably going to blow a few minds. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, so very excited to be here. Thank you for having me here. Let me share my screen and get started. I don't know how many people know Pindrop, so let me just start with a little plug on Pindrop itself. Our mission here is to provide security, identity, and intelligence in every voice interaction. Whether that voice interaction happens in a call center, which is where most of the interactions are today, or on a connected device or on a digital app, we are looking at providing the security on that voice interaction everywhere. And most of the success that we have seen as a business is today in the call center, because that's where, like I said, most of the voice transactions are. And our customers are very happily using our fraud detection and authentication capabilities there. I had the authentication products for Pindrop and started with the contact center authentication. Now I'm evangelizing the technology and the products on the digital channels. And like Brett said, very excited to talk about it today here at Synthedia. And one of the challenges that recently came up for every voice-based authentication tooling is the emerging threat of deepfakes. Right? We have all heard and seen a new article coming up every day, pretty much. In last 30 days, we have received almost over 30 different customer inquiries in terms of how do we protect against the deepfakes. So that's what I am going to talk about today in terms of what does Pindrop do for deepfake detection. And then I'll show you a couple of demos as well. Very excited to have this technology come to a point where we are able to detect the deepfakes pretty much created by any generative engine. So before I go into how we approach detecting the deepfakes, it's very important to understand different types of voice attacks that can happen with the synthetic voices, because a lot of articles, a lot of tools that are out there, different companies, they are focusing on one or the two, but there is an entire spectrum of voice attacks, starting with the age-old, somebody gets a clandestine recording of me and trying to impersonate me, of course, or for a person who's on several webinars or really active on social media, if somebody gets hold of several different recordings, they try to concatenate words from different recordings and try to make phrases that were never said by the person, and trying to impersonate that person as well. And we have all seen that in many different forms in the past. The other one that is a little bit more complex to create and detect is where the text-to-speech engines come in, and the attacker is still in the loop and they are typing in the responses, but then they're using a TTS engine to convert that into speech, either to just sound like any human being or to sound like a targeted human being. But the main difference here is that the person is typing in the responses. And this is actually one of the attacks that we started seeing in some of our customers now, but you can even hear the attacker typing in the responses. It's just funny to listen to those calls and hear the keyboard keys going on there. But examples of some tools where people are leveraging this is obviously 11 Labs, Resemble AI, Microsoft came out with that, claiming that they only need 3 seconds of audio to create a clone of a voice. And now recently Meta came out with VoiceBox, claiming only 2 seconds of speech is needed to create a clone of voice. So really a lot of advancement in that technology there as well. But what makes a little bit more of a complex attack is the advancement in generative AI with the large language models, combining that with NLP and the speech to text technologies. you can literally take the human out of the loop in that attack, where a conversation is happening with a person and the response of that person is analyzed in real time through NLP and leveraging large language models. Then context relevant responses generated by a machine fed into a text-to-speech engine. So a bot is talking to another bot, and there is a human-like conversation being had. And this is definitely more complex because the human in the loop aspect is removed. There is no typing involved. There are some delays which used to be unnatural delays in the speech synthesis attack that are taken away with the automation here. But it is still possible to detect some of it and pretty much all of it. And I'll go into some details there as well. Some of the popular examples were when the CEO of Do Not Pay came out with a video showcasing this technology and this technique to get a refund from one of the very popular banks. And Google Duplex is another example of such. But the most complex attack, and recently, we have seen this in Hollywood movies a lot. Recently, the Operation Fortune movie also leveraged this, the one that stars Jason Statham. And what happens in this particular attack is the speaker is speaking in real time, but in real time, that voice is getting converted to be somebody else's voice. There are various different technologies, including voice modulation, that is used. And Respeecher is a great example of such a tool. And like I said earlier, a lot of detection techniques and technologies are discussing one or two of these attacks. At Pindrop, we had started working on this threat a long time back, and we provide protection against all of these different types of attacks. And I'll be showcasing some of that today. So why are we in a position where we can actually detect all of these attacks? Is we started working on, our researchers started working on deepfake detection back in 2014. And we have created a proprietary training data set that consists of over 6 million different audio transactions that are very diverse. Over half of them are synthetic and recorded voices. Then there are real voices. And with this large data set, we are able to train our DNN-based models to identify very accurately what a real human speech looks like versus what a synthetically generated or recorded voice looks like. Pindrop has just been focused on providing voice security. We don't do a lot of other things. Voice security is our passion. That's our focus. And we take pride in challenging ourselves, not just commercially, but also institutionally and academically. And in 2015, we participated for the first time in a challenge called Automatic Speaker Verification and Spoofing Countermeasures Challenge. This is a very well-renowned challenge that happens every 2 years. The likes of Google and Facebook actually has produced data set there in terms of where both academia or commercial technologies are participating in trying to identify the spoofed voices. And the reason why we actually take this very seriously is a lot of times the academic institutions are just trying to get the best technology out there. Their goal isn't really limited by the viability of a commercial technology. And when you compete against the best that way, you can be the best as well. And that's why we are looking for such industry benchmarks, if you will, for our technology. We are very research oriented. Almost 1/3 of our R&D team is just PhD holder scientists who are trying to push boundaries every day and in what we do, and trying to get to a point where we can be very accurate in what we do. 2017 is when we filed the first patent. I'm not going through everything here, but there are a lot of things that we have done in the last 8 years. In 2018, we understood the threat of an automated synthetic speech attack that is a possibility. So we created that in our lab because it is very important to understand how the attackers think about how they approach things for us to be able to detect those attacks. 2019 ASV spoof is when we actually won the best single system to detect the logical access attack, which included the spoofed voices on one of the worst quality audio that you will have in the telephony network or the PSTN networks. And we won that challenge, filed 2 more patents there. Very excited about that. More patents came along. There is one that I'll touch base on a little bit in terms of an interesting incident. Back in 2021, when Anthony Bourdain's documentary movie came out, Roadrunner, the director actually announced that they had used 20 seconds of a deepfake in that movie. There was a huge backlash they didn't actually divulge any more. At Pindrop, we actually took that entire 2 hours of movie, ran it through our real-time detection for deepfakes, and we identified there were 3 distinct clips totaling to about 50 seconds, and a Wired magazine actually did an article on that as well. So it was always identifying any real-world examples that we can test our technology against and really find out how good or bad we are and then improve on that. So that's one thing that I've seen at Pindrop. We do pretty well. We are really good at a lot of things, but we approach that with humility because we want to continuously improve. And that's what our customers admire about us as well. But 2023 is when deepfakes have just exploded. We filed 4 more patents this year on deepfake detection, but there are so many different articles that have come out. There are so many public videos and audio that is available for us to test the technology against. We detected the Senator Blumenthal's cloned voice in his introductory remarks that he used in the Congress session, and I'll show you a video of that in terms of how we do that. When Joanna Stern from Wall Street Journal came out with her article about her cloned voice fooling the banking system of hers, we actually used that opportunity to test our technology again, and we do pretty well there as well. And more importantly, this year, we made the deepfake detection capability available in our API product that is available as a SaaS service. So really exciting things here, very interesting problem to solve. And I'm just so proud of our research team who keeps us humble, but at the same time, really makes tremendous progress every day. So how do we actually approach this? If you think about speech, think of it as a speech signature that needs to be generated. And when the machine is trying to do that, at a very high level, there are about 3 components. A component that hears and maps the sound, a component that puts together words and sentences together, and the component that actually generates the sound so that it sounds like speech. And I'm really simplifying it. There are a lot of complex components in terms of encoders, decoders, vocoders, DNN-based models or neural networks that come into picture in all of this. But at a very high level, think of it this way. And what happens is, even in the worst quality audio, like I mentioned earlier, which is a telephony audio, we have 8,000 different frames per second. That gives us thousands of different attributes to look at in terms of the anomalies. And those anomalies come in because even at a single frame level, what we call a spectral level, there are anomalies when the computer is trying to hear and map the sound. They hear it wrong, they pick it wrong. For example, fricatives in the English language are the perfect examples where the sounds of S and F or V, it sounds like noise to the machine sometimes, and it's not able to map that. Sometimes it's the encoder aspect of it or vocoder aspect of it that is generating the sound, and it generates noise in wrong frequencies that can be used to detect it. And then there is a temporal aspect. So when we have all the different frames come together, there is a time-based analysis that can be done. For example, if I'm saying, hello, Paul, as a human, my mouth is opening for the letter O and closing for the letter P. There's only a certain speed at which the mouth can close from O to P, and hence the sequencing of sounds need to be a certain sequencing of sounds, which will be for human, but a machine doesn't have a real mouth. So it's trying to map that together. It's trying to put those sounds together in a sequence, and sometimes it does that incorrectly. And all these anomalies is what we are able to leverage, not just to identify at a speech level, whether it's machine generated or human, but even creating some classifiers for the components of these deepfake generator systems as well, which actually is very, very important to identify not just the deepfakes from today, but deepfakes that will happen from generative AI engines that will come tomorrow. And that's what we're trying to do very, very accurately at Pindrop in terms of generating the generic models that are good for not just today and tomorrow, and then make continuous improvement to it so that we can stay ahead of this threat. So let me show you a demo here. As I mentioned, Senator Blumenthal is a very prominent personality who's looking at the perils of AI. And to make his point, he used a deepfake of his own voice. He used a clone of his own voice. And let me just play this video for you.
This hearing is on the oversight of our artificial intelligence, the first in a series of hearings intended to write the rules of AI. Our goal is to demystify and hold accountable those new technologies to avoid some of the mistakes of the past. And now for some introductory remarks. Too often, we have seen what happens when technology outpaces regulation. The unbridled exploitation of personal data, the proliferation of disinformation, and the deepening of societal inequalities. We have seen how algorithmic biases can perpetuate discrimination and prejudice, and how the lack of transparency can undermine public trust. This is not the future we want. If you were listening from home, you might have thought that voice was mine and the words from me.
So as you saw, when the senator was speaking live and then changed to clone voice and then changed back to real voice, the score, the liveness score that our engines are detecting changes in real time. What we're doing here is we're taking 3 seconds of audio snippets, feeding that to our real-time detection engine, and that's detecting the veracity of the voice. There is a blog that Pindrop did as well that I have in my closing slide. So absolutely check it out for the complete description of what we are doing here for this video. But let me also show you a real-time live demonstration in terms of how it works. So for this demo, we have created a demo application where I have enrolled my voice already, and I want to now get authenticated with voice. So where I'll read a short phrase, or I can say a short phrase. It's a completely passive technology in terms of authentication, not text dependent at all. And that makes it very easy to improve the customer experience, minimize the friction, or eliminate the friction depending upon the channel, the interface that you're exposing to your end consumer. And then I'll replay my voice, which I already recorded on my phone. And also I have used 11 Labs to generate a deepfake of my voice, and we'll play that back and we will see how the detection engine behaves differently. So let's get started. This is the demo app that I have. As I mentioned, I can really say anything, and let's see if it authenticates me. So at this point, what we're doing is the browser is is capturing my audio, buffering it, sending it in chunks to the SaaS service. And in the SaaS service, we are doing 2 different checks of voice match to my enrolled voice, and is it a live human or not? And for authentication threshold with voice match, it's anything above 74% is matched voice, and anything above 50% is a human live voice. As you can see, all of that happened in real time, very, very quickly, in less than a second. And it's my voice, so I got authenticated. It is a live voice, but let's try this again. And at this point, I'm going to use a recorded snippet on my phone that I don't know if you can see it there. So it's the voice memo app that I'm using here on the phone. So let's do that.
At Pindrop, every time we win as a company.
So as you can see, my voice match score is very close to being the threshold because it is really the recording of my voice, but we can detect that it is not a live voice. It's a recording, or it's just not a live human talking. I have this deepfake of my voice. I'll play this back next.
This is the deepfake of my voice. Let's use this one.
So let's use this one to see what happens now.
This is the deepfake of my voice. Let's use this one.
So again, the same thing. It is a deepfake of my voice. So voice match score is pretty close to where the threshold is, but we can detect that it is not a live voice. Now, let me say the same phrase that my deepfake said, and let's see what happens. This is the deepfake of my voice. Let's use this one. Of course, that was not a deepfake of my voice, and the detection engine is able to detect that it's my voice and it's a live voice. That was all that I had from the presentation perspective today, Brett. I'm happy to take any questions.
That's awesome, Amit. I love that demo. And like the timing is perfect for this, right? Because we're starting to see this happen. I wrote something last fall about deep fake fraud from voice clones and saying, I can only find like 3 or 4 examples of this in the last 5 years, but I can find a lot of articles with FBI agents saying this is coming. And lo and behold, we started seeing journalists, as you mentioned, a couple of them doing this, but then on Instagram, you see all the time, people are doing this. And sometimes they're doing it against banks. Sometimes they're doing it against just like common citizens, and like they're talking to someone's grandmother. So it feels like we've developed all these technologies, and every time we do, we have to invent something to solve the problem. And I think it's really interesting. What caused you to move from what you were doing already for enterprise companies to start saying, hey, deepfake detection, that's something we have to work on?
Yeah, so as you said, the deepfake threat always existed. We always saw in certain places it was being abused for certain threats. And as Pindrop is a voice security company, we were aware of the fact that there is a threat to the voice-based interactions as well. So we started working on it earlier, but to your point, the technology wasn't where it actually created a very widespread attack scenario. But if you think about the advancement in the generative AI is not stopped at this point, right? It will continue to happen. And what will happen is the technology will get better in terms of synthetic speech generation. And today we are seeing for our customers in the enterprise world, especially in the call centers, fraudsters run their own call centers. They are not trying to attack a single account in a large bank. They are trying to go after any financial institution, any organization, to just get the data for the user, or to actually perpetrate fraud, financial fraud against those accounts. And the real threat is that the generative AI technology gets to a point where today they are creating these call centers, the fraudulent call centers, by hiring bodies, by hiring humans. Instead of that, they can just use bots to create a widespread attack with just one or two fraudsters. And that's the scenario that absolutely is imminent. And at Pindrop, we are always trying to stay ahead of the next level fraud patterns. We have been very, very successful in identifying the fraud that happens today in the contact centers. And that's what really was the reason why we started looking into it. It just, sometimes we smile about it, that the fact that we were talking about it for so many years and now the entire world is talking about it. But the reality is, you're absolutely right. It's moving from not just the risk to consumers at corporations, but also risk to consumers directly. And in all honesty, that's very sad to see as well. The grandmother scam that you mentioned, my heart bleeds every time I think about the grandmother who got that call. But that's the reality. That's the world that we live in. And we need some good guys. And that's why we are also very upfront in the and very involved in the research community. We create white papers because we do believe that bad guys will collaborate or not, I don't know, but good guys need to collaborate to ensure that we can make the world a safer place.
What a great point there. And I think about, over the years, we've talked a lot about like voice authentication for biomarkers. In this case, it's almost like voice de-authentication. And maybe this is the thing that's going to happen, is that everybody's going to have to put voice authentication in just to make sure that there's a liveness score there, that it is the person. And one of the things I really like the liveness score as well, because sometimes we don't sound like ourselves, and that we've seen voice identifiers that sometimes didn't do a match if we had a cold or something else, or we'd been to a concert and we sounded a little bit different. Plus our voices change every 6 months, right? And so like I know your system will pick that up, like with people's voices change. But I really like this idea too, that the liveness score might be ultimately the key to protect everybody.
Yeah, no, so you're absolutely right, Brett. There is a very different use case even outside of authentication. We have all seen the bot detectors. We have all had to do the CAPTCHAs even in the online world. And all they're trying to do is they're trying to just make sure it's a real human trying to interact with the website or with the application there. And the need absolutely exists, and voice liveness absolutely can solve that need as well. On top of it, to your point, voice biometric based authentication is certainly a solution, an answer to identify that you are actually interacting with a customer of yours and not anybody else who's trying to impersonate that person. But having said that, there is a threat, and every voice biometric solution will have to solve for that threat as well. And that's what we are doing. We believe we are the pioneers in this field and absolutely can authenticate with as little as 0.5 seconds of speech. And to your point, we have built in the resiliency for anti-aging and the voice changes that the humans go through, even the noise, so that it doesn't matter what device you're interacting from, which environment you're interacting from. We are able to authenticate all of that, which is great. But at the same time, when the threats like these emerge, we have to add protection for that as well. And that's why we are focusing on this aspect too.
That's right. Now let's close out. There's a question here. We've got to move on to the next speaker, but there was around voice watermarks, DRM, some of those types of things. And I'll just say my perspective is I think it's great that a lot of people are starting to come out with these audio watermarks and other types of verification tools. That's really helpful. We should allow the good actors to prove or to show that they're being good actors in the space. But unfortunately, the bad actors don't follow the rules. And so we're still going to need some sort of fail-safe mechanism like Pindrops.
Absolutely. So that's one piece. And Brett, even in the watermarking technology, any watermarks that are detectable hypothetically have the threat from bad actors, like you said, where they will detect it and then they will override it. So with the watermarking technologies, we need something that is detectable but unalterable. And when we have that technology, that's when it will be safe. It's not easy to create. It's and we know that because we have in our labs watermarking technologies ourselves. We don't put anything in the product until we know that we are the best out there. But it is a difficult problem to solve. To your point, we still need the generic models that can detect the deepfakes because bad actors will absolutely not follow the rules.
Amit Gupta, Pindrop Security. Everybody go check that out in their resources tab. You can go check that out, plus in the link list. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Brett, for having me.
Synthedia, the business and technology of generative AI. Generative AI, synthetic media, large language models, image generators, virtual humans, voice clones, deepfakes, ChatGPT, and more.